Welcome, everyone on our call today. Thank you so much for joining this teleseminar. It's called Community-Supported Entrepreneurism, REconomy in Totnes, England. So without further ado, let me introduce the event today and our speaker, and we'll do some polling questions as well. So the event today, it's really looking at the economic system in Totnes and how different models and processes have been put in place. So we'll be hearing about a lot of that. And Jay Tomt, he is the presenter today. He's co-founding member of the Totnes REconomy project, and he's an independent consultant. He has also co-developed the Transition Network REconomy Project's Local Economic Blueprint course and handbook, and he advises community groups developing their own local blueprints. He has also been leading workshops, and hopefully we'll have him coming to our national gathering in St. Paul at the end of July, but we don't know for sure yet. And prior to moving to the UK from San Francisco, Jay spent 10 years as an entrepreneur and consultant in the green business movement. And he spent 12 years in Silicon Valley. He holds an MBA from Monterey Institute of International Studies and a BA in philosophy from San Jose State University. And he's also a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. So that is who is with us today. So welcome, Jay, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for that, Caroline, and thanks everyone for being on the call. I hope nobody's disappointed that I'm not English. Should we maybe just start with one of those poll questions just to kind of see who's out there?
Yes, I'd love to do that, and I think one of the ones that I thought I would lead first, and then I'll turn it over to you, Jay, is just a curiosity. If people could press 1 on their keypad if they're involved or have been involved with the Transition Initiative, and press 2 on your keypad if you're involved in another type of resilience building effort, and press 3 if none of those. So 1 if you are involved or have been involved in a transition initiative, 2 in a related community resilience building effort, and 3 if none of those apply to you. So numbers are coming in, and at this point it looks like we have 36% of the participants are from transition initiatives or have been involved in them. 27%, and the numbers are changing as I speak, 27% related community resilience work, 15% not either of those. So thank you, folks, for doing that. And Jay, you had a few polling questions as well, so why don't you let us have those?
Caroline, I totally forgot what they were.
Oh, I know one. One was, well, let's do this. This would be yes or no. So 1 for yes, 2 for no. Who on the call is involved in economic development? So 1 if you are, 2 if you're not. An economic development group, or even as your business, and then 2 if that doesn't apply to you. And those numbers are coming in, and it looks like it's pretty balanced. Looks like it's about 50-50. So that's interesting. And then we were also wondering, Jay, if there might be some people on the call that are involved in government or government policies or something like that around economic development. So that's even going to be a smaller subset. So 1 if that is something that you are, and 2 if not. So 1 if you're involved in government, in policy making, economic development. And it looks like there's numbers are changing. 11% are, and 52% responded that they weren't. So didn't get everyone responding, but that's fine. And Jay, if you think of any other polls or questions along the way, I'll definitely follow your lead. So,
okay.
So yeah, happy to do that. And again, just want to remind people who might be coming in a little late that there is a PDF. It's on our website, transitionus.org. If you see the event posted in the middle, follow through on that link, and it'll take you to the event page, and you can download the PDF. So if you can do that, great. And if not, don't worry. We have it for you, and it will be recorded, this whole session. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Jay, and you'll be doing some of a presentation, maybe getting some responses along the way, and then we'll have a Q&A session as well. So
great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, and again, thanks everyone. Good to know that that there's kind of a range of folks out there. This is not a transition-only kind of activity. In fact, I became interested in local economics and what you might call economic relocalization when I was still in California, working in a few kind of community-scale green businesses. And so when I came to the UK, I was already kind of full of some experience and some ideas. And it turned out to be pretty good timing. I moved here about 6 years ago, and it was right when Transition Town Totnes was just trying to rekindle its little theme group around business and economics. And we undertook a few projects right away, like the local economic blueprint, and we started the local entrepreneur forum, and we had this idea of starting up an incubator, which was really kind of the impetus for the local entrepreneur forum, and we ended up starting up an incubator too. But we were kind of starting organically at first. We didn't really have a master plan, but I think what has emerged for us is a bit of an approach. So that's primarily what I'm going to be talking about. And I'm not sure how long I'll talk for, but 30 or 40 minutes, I guess, and we'll have time for questions and some discussion. So let's see. I'm on page 1. I'm going to go to page 2. That's just a little title page, and it has my email address and the URL of our website here in Totnes. And then I'm going to skip on to page 3. So one question that comes up a lot is, well, what the heck is REconomy? It's a funny word, and I'm not exactly sure who came up with it here in the UK. Somebody with the Transition Network. It also happens to be the name of a waste haulage company here in this country. I didn't really like it at first, but it's come to be kind of a useful shorthand for people. So it's kind of caught on, and people use the term to kind of refer to this work that we're doing. I mentioned relocalization a minute ago, but I think what we're doing, if you think in terms of economic relocalization, that's probably too narrow a frame for what we're doing. Creating an alternative to neoliberal globalized corporate capitalism is maybe too wide a frame. But we like to think about what we're doing as first of all being citizen-led. So we're a group of citizens who decided to do something. We are trying to bring about a new kind of economic reality, at least here locally or here in our region, where we can have some impact. What kind of new economic reality? something that is fair and inclusive, regenerative, ecologically regenerative, and also resilient. And we draw on a lot of sources, obviously permaculture and sustainable development, at least as practiced by certain folks. Schumacher College is nearby, so that is also a big source of thinking, and a lot of interesting people come through there. Degrowth is something that is getting some traction in some parts of Europe. Degrowth is very similar in many ways to what we think about when we think about economic relocalization. We draw a lot of stuff coming from the U.S., from the Bali network and what we know of as community wealth building. Economia Solidaria, which is very big in Latin America and some parts of Europe, also has very interesting ideas and models that we can draw on. The cooperative movement, of course, open source and the commons. Anyway, there's lots of interesting ideas and models that feed in to our process anyway. At the end of the day, it's okay, what can we do? What do we have energy for? And so that's what we've been doing. Okay, I'm moving to the next page 4, and it just says on the slide there, community-supported entrepreneurism, and there's a nice picture of happy people raising their hands. It's a picture taken from the local entrepreneur forum, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So just turn the page here to page 5. If we want a new kind of economic system, we have to create the conditions for new economic actors, new economic relationships, new economic models to emerge and flourish. So this is kind of our starting proposition. And I like it because it immediately kind of frames the whole enterprise in terms of systems thinking. So our answer to that is, at least at this point, is we want to try to catalyze an entrepreneurial problem-solving culture. We want to try to mobilize local and regional financial and social capital. And we want to begin building out kind of an enterprising ecosystem, if you will, that can support these new actors and new models and so forth, and be regenerative, so to keep it going. I'm skipping down to page 7 now. So what do we mean when we're talking about an entrepreneurial problem-solving culture? I have to admit, I grew up in Silicon Valley. Well, I grew up in Santa Clara Valley. It became known as Silicon Valley later. I started up a couple of companies there, worked with a lot of startups, so I'm quite familiar with that whole story. Arguably, it's the most entrepreneurial culture in the world, and yes, it's not producing the kinds of enterprises that we need right now in this time in history. But there are lessons to be learned there. So I think I'll come back to that in a second. I guess the first question is who are we talking about when we're talking about entrepreneurs? So for us, we have a very broad definition, and we don't shy away from this term entrepreneur. For us, we are talking about the kind of entrepreneurs that we need given this moment in history. So we need activists, organizers, permaculturalists. We need kind of a blend of all those, into a kind of entrepreneur that can make something happen, that can be financially self-sustaining, that can be solving problems and contributing something positive to the community. But also, it includes an entrepreneurial culture includes investors too, and people who can play that role and play other roles too, experts, business experts of all kinds, mentors, other kinds of supporters. There's lots of opportunity for lots of different roles and lots of different relationships. And I will try to explain in a few minutes about how we are trying to create space for those. Mobilizing local financial and social capital, this should be self-evident. In the UK, you've probably heard the term nanny state, and culturally speaking, for many folks who are interested in starting something up, the first place to look is the state for some kind of funding program or some other kind of philanthropic foundation who can offer grants or that sort of thing. And there are not a lot of other institutions, not a lot of other sort of financial infrastructure around. There are some banks, but in the UK, there are national and multinational banks, but there are no community banks, there are no local banks, there are no regional banks. There are some other institutions like building societies and some credit unions, but they are not quite like they are in the States. So we really don't have much of a banking system. But what we can try to do, though, is try to unlock some of the financial capital that exists amongst the people who live in the community or live in the region. In Totnes, we live in this. Totnes is in the southwest of England, and we live in a really nice, beautiful area. So, in fact, when I first moved here, I would often refer to Totnes as kind of the Sebastopol of England. So a little bit agricultural. It's beautiful. It attracts all kinds of interesting people who choose to retire here with money or to sort of semi-retire here or what have you. So there's lots of people with money, and not just big money, but just, even just a little bit of money. And so what we're trying to do is create avenues for people to be able to lend some of that or even gift it to folks who might be looking for seed capital. We talk in terms of friendly and patient capital, so that kind of implies that when you know somebody, you're maybe a little bit freer to share the risk or not demand a high financial return. The other thing is that there are a lot of people with skills and other kinds of expertise and knowledge in the area, so we're looking to kind of mobilize those people too to get them involved in mentoring or participating in other ways to help out young entrepreneurs or startups or even young companies who might need help to expand their operations or solve problems in some way. And then finally, there's underutilized capacity and resources of other kinds. So people might own a little bit of land that could be put to use. They might have a vacant building or garage or something like that. So we're looking at all those things. Again, we have kind of a broad definition. In fact, we kind of look at this kind of capital as really as being potential seeds for something good to happen. And then the third thing I mentioned was building out an enterprising ecosystem. So, drawing on my experience and the experience of Silicon Valley, it's a fecund ecosystem for people who want to start something up. That is, it's just rich and abundant, many pathways to kind of advance your ideas or get what you need. And we don't have that here. And I reckon that that kind of thing doesn't exist in a lot of places in the U.S. either. So what are we talking about? We're talking about, institutional infrastructure and systems like banks and other kinds of things like that, incubators, co-working spaces. It also includes universities, maybe local government also. In fact, I think I think local government agencies, redevelopment agencies, and other other arms of local governments have a role to play. And I think in these days, at least what I'm seeing here in the UK, is local authorities, because of austerity and funding cuts, they're a little bit more motivated to work with community groups and other actors to try to make things happen. But there are other kinds of things that could contribute to an enterprising ecosystem too. And this is one area where I think folks over here on this side of the Atlantic are gaining inspiration from what's going on in places like Cleveland, with the evergreen cooperatives and the anchor institution model and stuff like that. Fab Labs is another kind of thing that people are getting interested in. So all of these things together can begin to make a bit of an ecosystem that could, support more of this kind of entrepreneurial activity and work synergistically. Any questions or comments so far? Can we maybe take one or two if there is one or two?
Yes, absolutely. So press 1 on your keypad, and we'll call on the first couple of people. And again, if you have questions that don't get answered, we'll hopefully do that later. Christina, go ahead.
Hi. I wasn't familiar with what you mentioned is going on in Cleveland. You said something about evergreen cooperatives, something like that?
Yeah. So a nonprofit in Cleveland. So Cleveland, just to set the scene, is a Rust Belt city. So it has kind of suffered from the offshoring of manufacturing, this process of globalization that's been going on for the last 30, 40 years. So unemployment, underemployment, and so on has been, kind of associated with Cleveland for a long time. So a nonprofit said, okay, let's figure out a way to create some jobs, and to create some jobs that are not going to be offshored. So they thought, well, let's see if we can go to the hospital. The local hospital isn't going anywhere, and their values and goals were such that they would support anything that would increase the well-being of the community. And they started. They went. I think they. This is my version of the story, okay? But they went to the hospital and said, basically, look, you are spending $1 or $2 million a year on laundry services. What if we started a cooperative, put some people here in Cleveland back to work to do your laundry? You can move that laundry contract away from this multinational company to the Evergreen Cooperative that we'll start. You'll put people to work, and as we say here in England, Bob's your uncle, which means basically they did it, and it happened, and then the Evergreen Cooperative went back to the hospital and said, great, this is working well. Why don't we now start growing greens for your food service? So they did, and apparently they built the biggest greenhouse in America, and they're growing tons and tons of greens for the hospital. And this has become known variously as the Evergreen model, or the Cleveland model, or the anchor institution model. This term anchor institution just comes from the fact that the hospital is anchored to the community. It's not going anywhere. So this is being looked at in other communities, and it's even being looked at in a city here in the UK called Preston. It doesn't have to be a hospital. It could be anybody. But anyway, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Let's take a couple other questions. Kathy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm in Minneapolis, and what your talk was making me think of was formerly the E.F. Schumacher Center, I believe it was called, but now it's called the Schumacher Center for New Economics. And E.F. Schumacher was kind of a philosopher who wrote Small is Beautiful, and I think there was another book, Good Work, or something like that. Anyway, his theory was that these more human-scale industries could be made to counteract the globalization push. And so that there might be one bottling plant, and they'd have 3 different sizes of jars and bottles, and anybody could contract with them to put their stuff in jars or bottles, and that it would be all locally owned, locally sourced silicon dioxide for the sand for the glass, and it would be of a local sustainable scale. So that's just one example.
Mm-hmm.
And so this organization has existed for over the decades, trying to keep his ideas and thoughts alive, that there might be some ways to collaborate with that bunch of folks, along with all of the old things like, what is that place in Scotland that has sort of like a biodynamic...
Windhorn, I think you might mean.
Yeah, sort of all of these fringe elements, and pull them back together along with the Transition Towns movement.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. And I think all of, there's a lot that's now in vogue that might have been a little passé. So thankfully these things are emerging again, and they've been amongst us for a long time. Jack, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, sounds like your description is very similar, although broader than Woody Tash and the Slow Money movement, which is a spinoff from the Slow Food movement, and also similar to the book Local Vesting by Amy Cortez, and Local Dollars, Local Cents, a book by Michael Schumann. So it sounds like you're on the same track. I don't know if you relate to those other people and processes and books that are also in the same, at least sound like in the same direction.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jack, and thanks, Kathy. We're definitely familiar with all of those things mentioned, and we're totally on the same page. So, I guess the thing to say is, we are aware of the different models and the different sort of takes on this that these folks are offering, and then we look around here and we say, okay, well, where's the energy? What can we accomplish? What makes sense for us? I'm a huge fan of what's going on at the Schumacher Center in Massachusetts, and they're doing lots of interesting things. I mentioned sort of in passing at the beginning that we undertook something here called the Local Economic Blueprint. They're doing something there around sort of crowdsourcing information around import substitution and looking for opportunities there, and I think that's really interesting and innovative. Something I'd like to do here. And Michael Schumann, I'm a big fan of his work and hugely inspired, and probably, if we could, we would steal all of his ideas and implement them. In short. Okay, well, let me just continue. So I've kind of just laid out what has emerged for us as an approach. So basically, if we want a new kind of economic system, we have to create the conditions. And so what we're trying to do there is catalyzing an entrepreneurial culture, mobilizing local financial and social capital, and building out enterprising ecosystems. I should say a couple things. One is I'm not the only one here doing this. So there's a whole bunch of us. I'm lucky to be on this call, but I have lots of colleagues, and they deserve as much of the credit or blame as I do. And secondly, when I'm talking about community-supported entrepreneurism, it doesn't include all the other great things that are being done here by Transition Town Totnes and other folks. So there's lots of other really interesting things happening, and I would encourage you to have a look sometime. We are developing a community land trust, building 25 homes for low-income people, for example, and some other interesting things too. What my work and this project has been mostly about is trying to support new actors, and primarily that means entrepreneurs. So when I moved here about 6 years ago, I mean, one of the things that seemed pretty obvious to me is if we want a new kind of economic system, we have to find a way to support entrepreneurs. An incubator is one good way to do that. So incubators are kind of a tried and true tactic or strategy for redevelopment agencies going back to the mid-'80s. And when we kind of restarted our business and livelihoods group, which we ended up calling the Totnes REconomy project, that was really the first project. How can we start an incubator? And we developed several different business plans. We pursued a few different opportunities to get some funding, to locate it in this building, and then that doesn't work, we're going to try this other building, and so on. And we were thwarted at every attempt. But as good systems thinkers and permaculturalists, we said, okay, the problem is the solution. So what if we just tried to do an incubator in one day? And that's what led us to the local entrepreneur forum. So if you skip to page 8, and I'm sorry for you people who don't have the slides in front of you, I've got a couple of different posters about the local entrepreneur forum. We just thought, okay, well, how can we do an incubator in one day? Referring back to my early years in Silicon Valley, I remember there were lots of these kinds of events that were meant to sort of bring potential investors and entrepreneurs together, and not just those kinds of people, but potential co-founders and team members and consultants and so on. So we thought, okay, well, let's try to do that. So we developed this idea, and here's how it works. Basically, it's a one-day event. We try to invite all of those kinds of people, entrepreneurs, potential team members, experts, investors, supporters of all kinds. So again, going back to what I was saying before, very broad definition. And we curate a day-long event. So typically, we have had kind of an inspiring speaker or two at the beginning of the day. And then we move into something that we call Be Like a Bee. So if you skip to the next page, maybe the next couple pages, you'll get a flavor. We essentially sort of facilitate some networking, try to break the ice a little bit, give everyone a chance to see who's in the room. If you're involved in transition, you've probably done these constellation activities before. So people kind of locate themselves in the room according to whether they're an entrepreneur or an investor, or they have a great idea, or they're just curious, or they're from the south part of town or the north part of town or whatever. We have a roving microphone. Everyone gets a chance to say something. And then we move into an open space activity. So people can suggest topics that they want to explore. And what we found is pretty much everyone gets a chance to meet who they need to meet, learn what they need to learn. Relationships begin to develop. We have kind of a needs and offers wall also, so people can post up things that they might need or want or can do. And then we have a shared meal. So typically we've begun these events in the morning, so it's a lunch. so all of this is meant to allow people to participate, which is very important, actually. If you are into development economics and have come across the work of Manfred Max Neef, he developed a theory or a model of fundamental human needs, and participation is one. So we found that to be really important, but also it creates space for building relationships. And if we're talking about creating an entrepreneurial culture, really it comes down to relationships at the end of the day. So that has worked very well because we've seen a lot of different kinds of collaborations emerge simply from that. And the feedback we get is that people, in fact, do get a lot of value out of it. If you go down to page 11, this is the one joke I have, and that is this is a picture of the oldest entrepreneur in Totnes giving advice to the youngest entrepreneur in Totnes. The next page is a little shot of our needs and offers wall. Then, if you go to 13, this kind of leads now into the second part of the day, and this is what we call the Community of Dragons. So here in the UK, we have this TV show called The Dragon's Den. Maybe you have something similar in the States. We have three kind of pompous, rich, successful business celebrities who sit behind stacks of money, and then entrepreneurs come up and they pitch their business plans, and the entrepreneurs either invest or they don't invest. There's some banter. Maybe they make fun of the crappy business plan or something like that. Anyway, so we decided to call our thing the Community of Dragons. So the way this works is we have 4 or 5 entrepreneurs that we have vetted, and we have criteria, get a chance to pitch to the investors. So the criteria, is that they have to be green and ethical, and their project has to be benefiting the community in some way. And we leave it pretty broad because we can't anticipate all the things that people might come up with. The opportunity to pitch has to be giving them an opportunity to get to the next level, whatever that means. So it might be launching, it might be expanding. They have to demonstrate some credibility, so track record, business plan, and another couple of points. So we have 4 or 5, depending on the year. We might have one spot reserved for a project led by young people. And who are the investors? Well, the investors are everyone. So we say that everyone has a stake in what their local economy looks like, what kind of businesses are going to operate there, and they should have a voice too in supporting the ones they really want to support. So we ask the entrepreneurs to pitch for something financial and non-financial. So maybe, hey, I need £1,000 to get started, help with my business plan and a website, and then the Community of Dragons responds. So somebody might raise their hand and say, I'll loan you £1,000, or I'll give you £100, or I'll give you £50 if somebody else gives you £50. I'll help you with your business plan. I'll make your website. I'll mentor you. I'll introduce you to somebody in my network. I'll give you, in one case we had a local farm who was launching a CSA program. Well, somebody in the audience just out of the blue said, well, I'll give you 25 fruit trees and 2.5 tons of mulch. And then people just begin to offer whatever they think. So I will make you a home-cooked meal. I will give you a massage. I will watch your kids while you go to a meeting. So it gives a chance for everyone to participate and to have a voice and to offer support. And anyway, if any of you have ever started a business, entrepreneurs need all kinds of support, not just a business plan, not just money, not just some expert telling them what to do, but they need tons of support and of all kinds. So what we found is that this activity is helping to generate this kind of culture, because people see that, okay, well, if I wanted to start something, I can see that I would be supported by my community. And it's really been, it's been a great experience these past 5 years, and a lot of really nice warm moments have ensued. If you get on to slide 15, you'll see some of the results that we've experienced. So we've been doing it for 5 years now in Totnes. The very first year, we didn't do the Community of Dragons model. We had 3 kind of green and friendly dragons up on stage. But the past 4 years, we've been doing the Community of Dragons model. We've had about 600 attendees altogether. We've had 22 enterprises pitch. About 19 are still going. We've raised, as a direct result of the event, about £80,000. But a few of the folks who've pitched have gone on to raise much more after the fact. About £15,000 worth of non-financial investments. So these are all the things like, a free day's worth, a day of free labor, whatever I'm trying to say, or help with a business plan or a website or a video or something like that. About 350 investments in all, and about 120 different people chipping in. So this, I think, is having some effect in getting people to think about playing different kinds of roles in the economy. We know for certain about 15 new jobs, and roughly speaking, we're spending about £1,200 per event. So it's a very low-cost kind of proposition. Lots of volunteer time, of course. So it's very doable. The model that we've been running is basically self-funded. So we charge people for the event, and that roughly covers our costs. And what I don't have this in the slide, but the other, I think, really telling thing is that in the very first year when we ran it, we really had to scramble to find people to put up on stage and pitch. I mentioned I'm from Silicon Valley. So, in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, you can hear a conversation like this almost, in any cafe. I'm starting up a company that is going to change the world. And people around the table will say, hey, that's really cool. I want to be a part of it. Hey, I'll tell my dad he can invest, or I know who you should talk to. Here in Europe, it's not like that. And here in Totnes, it's not like that. Maybe it's because it's a small town. I don't know. But people here are very reticent to put themselves forward for anything. And there's a bit of a kind of a cynical twinge in the culture. So that same kind of conversation would be more like this here. Oh, I'm thinking of starting a very humble bakery. Oh, it'll never work. Somebody tried that once. Or worse, you? You could never do that. So what we found is, after 5 years, this is beginning to turn around. So the first year we scrambled to put 4 people up on stage. Last year we had 18 different projects who wanted to be considered to pitch. And not only that, we have, we've been getting calls from people, from time to time, as if we're like a venture capital firm. Hey, I'm thinking about starting something up. Can you help me? So all very positive. So we've had good results here, and we've, tried to let people know throughout the transition network. One other group, as far as I know, has started using this event, and that is in Brixton. You might have heard of Brixton because they also have the Brixton pound. So this is another currency, kind of like the Berkshires model, which is similar to the Totnes pound as well. anyway, they did it last year. They're planning to do their second one this year, and they've had similar results so far. If you skip to the next slide, you can see more of some bullet points about our criteria. I'm not going to repeat that. If you skip to slide 17, you'll see some logos of some of the companies who have pitched. So we've had a pretty wide spread. So we've had some very, kind of transition-y ones. For example, the Living Projects was a group of young people who wanted to kind of do something really crunchy out on a piece of land to train other young people about how to grow food and stuff like that. Wild and Curious is another one. They're a foraging company, so they go out and do foraging walks, and then they make fruit leather. Then there's the New Lion Brewery. This is a local brewery started up by Rob Hopkins. Transition Homes, I mentioned earlier, they're the CLT project. Argan Solutions, they're a bit of a high-tech company making energy monitors. Grow Cycle is a company that grows mushrooms on coffee grounds. So a pretty broad spread. So how can you get started doing this? In fact, I should just back up and say really that this local entrepreneur forum, I think, is a catalyst project. So I said what we were trying to do earlier was to create the conditions, catalyze entrepreneurial culture, mobilize capital, begin putting together some kind of an ecosystem. As it turns out, the local entrepreneur forum kind of hits all of those points. Doesn't do those things completely, but it is an amazing kind of catalyst project that you can build on. And I think for anyone interested in starting up a process that can be regenerative in their community toward a new kind of economics, this is potentially your killer app. So can you start doing it from day one? I don't know. It depends where you are. It depends what the conditions are. But if you skip to the next page here, page 18, the first part of the process, I would say, is preparing the soil. And I like this kind of gardening metaphor, which I'll carry through a little bit. But preparing the soil. So where are you now? What are the conditions now in your town or in your community? What does the local economy look like? What are some of the key sectors? We did the local economic blueprint here, which is a slightly kind of conventional economic analysis of the food sector, housing, energy. We looked a little bit at health and care. I mentioned the import substitution survey in Berkshire, Massachusetts. This is being taken forward by the Berkshires folks. I think that's a really interesting kind of low-cost way to identify opportunities for relocalization. But there are other ways that you can sort of map what's happening in your local town and kind of see what the conditions are already. And then you can begin to build networks if you don't have them already, and relationships with key folks, maybe allies who could help take some of this forward. If you do have these conditions already, well, why not just jump right in? That's what we did. We had no idea what we were doing when we started doing the local entrepreneur forum. As it turns out, Transition Town Totnes, because it's been here, it was here for 5 years before we started it, had a lot of those relationships already in place. And so without knowing that we couldn't do it, we did it. And I think we only had about 3 months beforehand. And it worked. So there's no excuses. The next slide, it just kind of carries on the metaphor. So planting the acorn. So if we think of the local entrepreneur forum as your catalyst project, then if the conditions are right, just go for it and do it. The next slide kind of outlines some of the things you might want to think about to replicate this kind of project. So 6 months to a year out, and this is I think a very relaxed kind of schedule. But build your team. Do you have some people in place who could help you bring it forward? Do you have some finances to help you make it happen? Can you get started with some communications? Maybe you might want to undertake some warm-up events to get people thinking about, there's this thing coming up. Maybe I could pitch at it, or other ways of getting people to think about how they might be able to support entrepreneurs. 6 months out, you start thinking a little bit more in detail about the event itself, the venue, logistics, certainly recruiting and selecting entrepreneurs or enterprises who might want to pitch, offering some coaching, finding someone who can really kind of facilitate the community of dragons bit, because this is the bit where you're going to be asking people to invest and part with some money or resources, so you need someone with a bit of charisma. The day, I kind of explained what the day is like. So the big piece of advice here is having somebody who can be the producer on the day to make sure everything runs smoothly. And then the follow-up. So this is your opportunity to build on the local entrepreneur forum and really make it into something. And this is where I think we discovered that that we had something that was foundational that we could build on, and turn what would normally be looked upon as simply an event into something strategic. So if you go to the next slide, carrying on this metaphor one more step, cultivating the garden or developing your ecosystem. So what we have found simply through the event itself, we had something that we could begin developing, a really kind of interesting and productive network, a network of people who were not just relating to us, but relating to one another. And we saw and continue to see lots of interesting collaborations come through there. But because now you're kind of activating people in different ways and different kinds of people through this event, you're having an opportunity to build on those different kind of interests, and also an opportunity to begin telling a new kind of story about the kind of economy that you want to develop in your community. So an opportunity to talk about the benefits of local ownership and local production, of what it means to be an investor, a real investor. So it's not just about making more money, or what it means to be an entrepreneur. It's not just about making money, and so on. And we've had some really good success with it. So if you go to the next little slide, slide 22, it's a very simple little diagram that shows what we've done. So we started with the local entrepreneur forum. About 3.5 years ago, we started the REconomy Center. So because of the work that we did with the local economic blueprint in that process, we had built some relationships with people in local government, and that combined with what we were doing with the local entrepreneur forum gave us the credibility to then go to the local authority, the local government, and say, okay, you've got this office space that you own, it's vacant, give it to us, don't charge us any rent, and we will turn it into something wonderful. So we have this space, we don't pay rent, so therefore we're offering it on a pay what you can kind of self-managing model. So it's very low cost. The members all chip in to manage it, and people pay if they can pay. They don't pay if they can't pay, and if they can pay more, they pay more. And it actually works. We have about 100 members. Some of the members have gone on to pitch. We run workshops, so workshops on how to do a business plan, how to build a business model, how to do social media, how to raise money, and so forth. So that's worked really well, and now it's working kind of synergistically with the local entrepreneur forum. We've been developing mentor and professional networks too along the way. So we have people that we can point other people toward for help, or bring in these experts as needed to run a workshop or to participate in the LEF and so on. Also building convergence networks. So we use this word to kind of point toward spreading the movement, really spreading the thinking. So including other people who are doing other things in the new economy movement who might not ordinarily talk to one another. So people involved in community energy and food sovereignty and so on. They're included in all this too. Just because we're talking about local economics and entrepreneurship doesn't mean that these other folks don't have a role to play too. And that has helped us to begin widening the reach and influence of what we're doing here in Totnes across the region. And then we've just now launched our local investor network. So more or less this is based on the Lion model, or inspired anyway, coming out of Port Townsend, Washington. And the idea here really is just to create a bit of a network of people who've got some money, so that we can match them with viable entrepreneurs who might need some seed or expansion money throughout the whole year and not just wait for the local entrepreneur forum. And if you go to the next slide, this is really just trying to say that building an enterprising ecosystem can also include, and really should include, lots of other folks. So universities, local authorities. We recently just worked with one of our local county councilors to find £25,000 of investment for 6 projects. So that was a nice little win. We have in our region an entrepreneur training program called the School for Social Entrepreneurs. We've been developing a good relationship with them also. What's next? Possibly the Bank of Devon. So I think somebody asked a question via email a few days ago about public banking. We don't really have a public banking movement here at all in this country. But the Bank of North Dakota is a very interesting model for a couple of different reasons. One is the population of North Dakota is about the same as Devon County. And the idea of the Bank of Devon came up in one of our convergence network events last year, and again at last year's local entrepreneur forum. And this is a project that I think is getting some traction, may launch in the next couple of years. But there are other things too that could begin to flesh out this kind of ecosystem: a mutual credit system, perhaps, a Fab Lab. Atmos, which is a big community land trust project, bringing a brownfield factory into community ownership. This is a project that Rob Hopkins is also involved with, and I suppose it's loosely associated with Transition Town Totnes. So the next slide, I think, just really kind of poses the question, really, is could this kind of model, this kind of approach, work for green and social enterprises or cooperatives, commoners? I think depending on kind of your lens, at the end of the day, creating the conditions for new actors, mobilizing capital and so forth, kind of makes sense. So I think this is something that could work whether or not you're interested in supporting more cooperatives, or more green and social enterprises, or what have you.
Jay?
So,
Jay, I just wanted to remind us that we want to give some time for questions, and we're at about 60 minutes, and we're going to go for about 75. So just wanted to just offer a little time check and turn it back to you.
Well, that was really good timing, because what I was just about to say is I think I'm going to leave it right there. in this slide deck, there are a few more slides, and really they're just mostly images, just to give you a flavor of the REconomy Center and some of the other things I've mentioned. But essentially, this is the point I wanted to get to. I think this can work just about anywhere. And anyway, I'm interested in what you think and what questions you might have or comments.
Jay, just before that, do you want to just kind of orient us to the rest of the slide deck a little more? If there's any particular things that to take note of?
Not really. I think starting at slide 25, we've got the logo of the REconomy Center and a couple of images to kind of give you a flavor of what it looks like. Slide 29 offers a definition of a transition-oriented enterprise. So this is something, to be honest, this is an aspirational kind of definition. We don't spend a lot of time using that to evaluate projects that we're working with and so forth. But there it is. Transition-oriented enterprise is, I suppose you could think of as a social and green enterprise with a bit of a resilience component. After that, a couple of images about the local economic blueprint. Slide 32 offers a bit of data that we developed in that report about how much money we spend on local food and what it might mean if we could shift some of the spending away from the supermarket. After that are some images of the Atmos project and the Transition Homes project, really just plans at this point. And that's it, really.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, the rest of the slides look really interesting, too. So thanks for adding them, and we can peruse those at another time. And
Sure.
I wanted to ask if there are any questions or comments. Press 1 on your keypad, and hopefully there'll be some that we can call on right away. We're going to start with Naomi, and then we'll go to Bob in a few minutes. Go ahead, Naomi.
Hi, thank you very much for doing this. I'm in Maryland, the state of Maryland, and I did have an experience working with the local government, county government, and some good stuff is being done. But again, what strikes me in so many instances is the disconnect. There's so many wonderful things going on, but people have trouble learning about one another. So is there any thought about sort of training lobbyists, for lack of a better word, or advocates for this that can actually go to county governments or economic development departments or the county council, for example, and say, how about we look at this model for our community? It just seems to me that I really feel at this point in our history that if more people were aware of this and the work that's already being done on it, that we might be able to spread it a little more quickly.
Really good question. I think, are you still on the line? Are you part of a transition group?
I am not, but I'm literally contemplating this year. For 2018, our county council had voted unanimously for anyone running for council to be able to use public funds. So, of course, that's a real shot in the arm for people who have great ideas but don't necessarily know all the big money bags people. I'm very involved in the sustainability stuff, the green movement, and eco restoration work. And climate change and those sorts of things. But when I was with county government as a community liaison for a council member, it just struck me again very starkly that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing,
Yeah.
and it just seems that there are great things going on, and if there would be some way to like I say, literally train advocates that could go out with real specific knowledge and pitch and just basically, advocate for this,
Well, I think not to be trite, but we are the ones we're waiting for. So
exactly.
it may not be you, but at this moment in history, in the United States, in the UK, and other places, citizens need to be activated. So we can't be passive consumers anymore. We have to get involved. And so in the work that we've been doing within the context of transition, very often people get involved because they want to do something good for their community. They want to do something good for the planet. But they feel like they can't get involved in politics. But absolutely, more than ever, we need to do it. So it may not be that we need to train up a team of lobbyists, but we could certainly put people up for election, or the people who are already in office, include them in on some of this kind of activity. It may be politicians are followers. With a few exceptions, they're followers. So if you can make something good
ideally
happen, yeah. So in San Francisco is full of stories of activists who just went out and did something, and then the city said, "Hey, it's a good idea. Let's legalize it." And if you're familiar with city repair in Portland,
that's my hometown, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm from San Francisco.
Oh, good for you. I'm originally from San Jose, but I lived in San Francisco the last 15 years. Anyway, so that's my advice, and that's what we've done here. We've tried to include in all the things that we're doing, try to bend the ear of people who are in office, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But that's about all I can say about it.
And let's go on. We have got a few more we're going to try to get in here. Bob, go ahead.
Hi there. I'm Bob Gurfey. I'm with Transitions Lopez Island, which is on the west coast of Washington State. And
nice.
On your slide 24, I'm interested in the cooperatives. There's a contradiction between people who are entrepreneurs and people who want to invest for profit, and cooperatives that use this as a source of community employment and earnings. So what does that mean to you in economia solidaria and degrowth? Can you explain those quickly?
Okay. Very good question. I think contradictions are fun to play with. So often in our movement we try to avoid terms that have negative connotations, like economics, like entrepreneur, like investor, like money, like profit, and so on. What we advocate is reappropriating those words and making them work for us. So when we're talking about entrepreneurs and investors, we're talking about, in the case of entrepreneurs, people who have the creative energy to make something happen, and you need this to start up a cooperative. So the motivation doesn't have to be getting rich, but the same skill set and the same sort of can-do, persistent attitude is necessary sometimes. And by liberating the financial capital in the community to support such an effort, I think is a great way to go about it. If you want to start up a cooperative, you're going to need some capital to make it happen. If you can get it from the members, great. But even so, an event of the kind I was describing can create a nice kind of welcoming, warm space for that to happen. Economia solidaria is, or solidarity economics is really just kind of a network of cooperatives and social enterprises that are supporting one another. I think there's a really good example in New York, but it's quite established. Well, in fact, there's a global network called REPESS, RIPESS, that connects all of the various solidarity economics networks. And then, so it's very much, part of the cooperative movement. And then degrowth comes out of the continent of Europe. And if you looked at what it means in practice, it's very much like transition. It's very much about a voluntary simplicity and relocalization, creating means and pathways outside of the market to meet our needs. The key element of degrowth has to do with the name and the very confrontational nature of it, as a way to force a dialogue that can't be co-opted. So sustainability has been co-opted by the corporates, but you can't really co-opt degrowth. So that's kind of gets to the heart of what that's about.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for at least one, maybe two more questions. Deborah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm in a very rural part of southwestern New Mexico, 100 miles from the Mexican border. And thank you for all of your information. I'm going to piggyback on Bob from Lopez Island, and I've visited Lopez. We got very interested and got the tours of some of your land trusts in Lopez. We would like to know if within this local economy blueprint we would actually get some step-by-step ideas about creating community land trusts and also for creating worker-owned cooperatives.
The short answer is no, but
okay.
I'm guessing I don't have at my fingertips anyway a toolkit for creating a CLT, but I know you can find lots of tools out there. There's probably a CLT network in the United States, and similarly for worker-owned cooperatives, I know I have seen a few toolkits that talk about how to do that. And in fact, you know what? I just downloaded a toolkit today, not specifically about worker-owned cooperatives, but it is a curriculum for creating and starting up cooperatives. It's called Collecting Ourselves, and it comes from, let's see here, it comes from someplace in Minnesota, but I will send the information to Caroline, and she can post it up, perhaps.
Yes.
Okay,
or
great.
You could Google North Country Cooperative Foundation.
Okay.
And Shareable also has a lot of toolkits. If you look up shareable.net, you might find something there. They're a great resource, kindred spirit. And let's see if we can get one more question in, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Jay, for just some closing comments, and we'll wrap it up. Cade Hamilton, go ahead.
Hey, thank you for presenting. So I'm not really part of a transition thing or anything, but I've been kind of looking into it, and I've decided that I kind of need to start something. But I live in Mississippi, and so I kind of was hoping if you had an idea of how to kind of frame this idea of REconomy and even like transitioning the values that it represents to people in a place that it's not even like on their radar and that aren't really necessarily concerned about sustainability or green or any kind of the things that we should be doing in a place like that.
That is a really good question. I think I would start with trying to gain an understanding of what does resonate for people in your community. What do people care about? And you might find that there's a lot of common ground around things like creating opportunities for your kids, making sure everybody has a roof over their head, and that the environment's kind of clean and safe. Around here, we use language like that. Sometimes we talk about innovation. If we're talking about starting green businesses or finding models that can meet our needs outside of the market, we talk in terms of innovation. So very often you have conservatives who have a very kind of narrow view of what economics is about. It's about growth, it's about productivity and innovation and so on. If you can turn the tables, use some of the same language in a different way, what we found is that you can identify common ground and turn people to look at things in a more sort of in a wiser, kind of more productive way. So that would be my advice there. And I would say also have a look at George Lakoff's work on framing. That might give you some ideas too.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jace. I wanted just to give you a couple of moments to do some closing comments, if you would, and then we'll unmute everyone, and everyone can shout out where they're calling from and anything they want to say. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, I guess the thing to say is that there are many paths. There's lots of good work out there. In fact, very often within the transition movement and other places, we're very fond of pointing toward examples, exemplars, lighthouses, beacons that can kind of point the way. And I think we're beyond that stage now. We don't need any more good examples. We have a world full of good examples. In fact, we have a World Wide Web full of good examples. You can Google it. Any of the things I've talked about, any interesting models that are working, that are more just, more ecological, and so on, they're out there. We are living in a time now where we need to be spreading the innovations and implementing what works wherever they can work. So it is a time in history to be rolling up our sleeves. So what we have going on here is something that we think works. It's not a panacea. It may not work everywhere, but it's low cost, and we think it can work in a lot of places. And so we're very happy that we've had this opportunity to share it. But like I say, there's lots of other stuff going on too. So perhaps after this call, if you haven't heard about some of this kind of thing before, you'll be motivated to do some Googling of your own. I think there are a lot of resources on the Transition US website, on our website, and other places. And if you would like to follow up with me in any way, feel free to do that. Send me an email, and I'll be happy to share whatever information I can. So thank you very much, and maybe I will see you again down the road somewhere.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jay. And just want to remind people your website information is on the presentation, so you can find it there. And I'm happy to send out things to people on the call, Jay, if there's something that you think of that people should really get a hold of this. I'm happy to do that.